everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. For this week's show, we are discussing how to evolve after a religious trauma. And I am talking to some of my favorite guests, the Four Hands. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question. Let's give a shout out to our top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. If you would like to support me, you can. Just go to sherrypalace.com and there you will find literally dozens of ways to do so for as little as $3 a month. Thank you in advance, and thank you for welcoming us into your home and joining this conversation. I appreciate you all. Okay, let's meet our guests and get smarter. Carl and Laura Forehand were in the ministry for 20 years. They went through a deconstruction and then left organized religion. They are authors and speakers who founded the Desert Sanctuary. They have a ton of books to help you in your journey. I'm actually going to do another one before I bring them on because I want to introduce Laura too. Laura Forehand has a master's in elementary education and has taught first and second graders for 16 years. She is a board member and certified trainer of Whole Brain Teachers of America. She co-hosts the Whole Brain Teaching, a podcast on Podbean. She also writes and podcasts with her husband, Carl. They co-wrote Out into the Desert, Thriving Outside of Organized Religion, which is available on Amazon. Most importantly, she's a mom of 3 and a Mimi to Holland, Jackson, and Sloan. Welcome back, you guys.
Hey, how are you?
I am good. And I am so thankful that you guys came up for this with this talk because I had nothing. I am going so crazy trying to get this book out that it was like oh no, it's almost Tuesday. So thank you so much. This is the perfect topic to talk about. And I understand you guys have another book coming out that will give this foundation, right?
Yeah, Carl can talk a little bit about that because he's the one that's kind of putting it all together.
I having done this right now, I honor you. It's a lot.
It's a process. Yeah,
it's a lot.
It's a deal. That's right.
Hi, Reverend Samuel. How are you? Good to see you here. So, talk to me.
Okay.
We were talking a little bit backstage about the deconstruction stuff, and we were talking about how you go through this type of stuff and you start learning this stuff, and then you kind of feel alone. And you guys have coined the term, out in the desert. But how do you deal with the shame and the regret and everything that goes on in part of that deconstructing process?
Yeah. So I think what we've been doing is writing books just as we've been going. We've been interviewing people. We've interviewed over 300 people, heard their stories, heard about their trauma, talked to a lot of experts, talked to you a couple of times. And, as we've been writing, we've been discovering things, we've been kind of recording our journey and what happened, and even the hard parts of that, the healing part, the stuff that isn't easy to write about or talk about. But what I really want to do in this book, I think, is just going to be an electronic book where people have good access to it and where I don't have to sell it and things like that, which I'm not that good at anyhow. But a lot of it is pulling those pieces of those other books, like Out in the Desert and Leaning Forward, the parts that have to do with healing. Because like in Leaning Forward, there was like 3 or 4 doctrinal issues that I was wrestling with and talking about. This time I'm trying, and we're still working on it. There's still a lot of work to be done, trying to add a few things in that we've learned, and also some things from the Leaning Forward book, and which some of the things in the Leaning Forward book were condensed from the Out in the Desert book. Yeah. So, it's all I called it distilled. It's being distilled.
Interesting.
We go along, and so I hope this book is that. At the very end, I'm gonna have a lot of resources. Plus, we've been building resources from the other. Been building resources from our conference, all the speakers, and
Yeah.
trying to gather those resources in a place out there somewhere on my website called the Treasure Trove of Trauma Resources or something like that. We just keep meeting so many people that have access to so much information, and we're trying to key into that. So at the end of this little 10-chapter book, it's not very big, we talk about somatic therapies. And
explain that.
So somatic therapies are things like focusing, things like EMDR, tapping, all of those things that incorporate. So talk therapy accesses your mind, and you relive the experience. You learn more about what happened, and you work through that. You start working through that kind of in a front brain kind of way. But somatic causes you to go to your body, which is where your trauma is stored. And then the mind and body work together to help that trauma shift and integrate back into your life in a way that's productive and helpful. You'll still be triggered by things, but you may respond instead of react. And you're not using a 5-year-old way of dealing with things. You're dealing with it as an adult, because the mind and the body get connected on that trauma. Does that make sense at all?
Totally.
I am definitely not an expert, so.
Every time someone brings up, like not acting like a child, I get so envious and be like, I want to act like a child and just throw myself down on the grocery store and just throw my hands. I mean, I would be locked up if I did that. A child is picked up and said, come on, go about your way. But yeah, I mean, now is a time in our society where the information is out there. Like when I started deconstructing a couple decades ago, I felt really alone. I mean, I really thought that I was the only one that was going through this and the only one that had seen all of this stuff. But now there's so many resources out there. And because of social media, we have come together into this tribe, if you will, to say, okay, if we've done it, you can do it. And this is how we've done it. So what kind of examples do you give in order to accomplish that healing? Because I think the healing is the most important part. I mean, you're literally leaving an abusive relationship. And a lot of times, I mean, I've been in a couple abusive relationships that I didn't even know were abusive until I got out, until I was able to see and think and hear and be like, oh my God, that's right. He was doing that to me. He was doing this. But because you're so involved and indoctrinated a lot of times, there's so much shame. There's so much pain. There's all of that. So where do you start?
Okay. So I decided to start with something that David Hayward, the Naked Pastor, taught us. He said, it's going to be okay. And
yeah,
I think that's the first thing out of the gate. And we've avoided, writing something that's 10 steps. Do these 10 steps and you'll make it, do these 10 steps and you'll succeed. But if we're going to kind of get all the pieces of what you're going to see, what you're going to experience, what's going to happen, you got to kind of start at the beginning. What's it going to be like when you come out?
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I'll read something to you. Maybe Laura will help me.
I can't.
You can't see it. So it says, after a while, it says, we can't really tell you what to do. There's no super drug or magic prayer that will make all your dreams come true. Anything worth doing usually takes determination, imagination, and persistence, otherwise known as work. Even though we can't give you a formula, we have been interviewing people since we got here. We've been recording our thoughts about what we learned along the way. It's not a prescription for success. It's a transcript and a description of our journey and the road that lies ahead of you. It's not a well-worn path because every journey is different. It is, as they say, the road less traveled.
Mm.
We acknowledge and understand that you may have feelings because of your inherited beliefs. You may be experiencing fear, anger, anxiety, sadness, or various combinations of feelings besides happiness, which you were prescribed by religion. Your emotions are valid. Not only are they legitimate, but they are necessary.
Mhm.
And they will help you get better and process your grief and pain that you're only now realizing you have. As you hear people's stories around the campfires in the desert, you will find language for your journey, and eventually you will tell your own story. And then that's where I say the one thing I hope you understand is it's okay. And then the chapter headings in that first chapter are things like you're not alone. The things they warned you about aren't going to happen.
Right?
You're not going to go to hell. You're not going to slide down the slippery slope. All of that stuff's not going to happen. I promise you.
There's no barbed wire pole to hell. I promise you.
Hold me to it. They told us, it says, told me of a slippery slope that I would slide down and of spiritual forces that would attack me almost like a virus. All I can say is now, after 8 years, it's not true, But then, facing our fears, addressing trauma.
Well, and that's one of the things that really gets people who have experienced religious trauma, right? Because part of that indoctrination and making it stick is demeaning your brain, demeaning your body. So you not only have to get out of the fact that you are leaving this faith that caused a lot of negativity, you have to shut those voices down. And that can take so much time. And in moving from pain to anger, I mean, you're going through the stages of grief, just like you have lost a loved one, because a lot of times the religion is a loved one. It was my identity for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are taking that off, you're not only questioning everything because of what you were taught, and to doubt yourself, that it makes all of that healing even more so. And a lot of people get stuck in the angry stage. A lot of people get stuck in the I don't want this anymore. And that's warranted too. But I feel like true healing comes when the anger stops, when something still is so painful that it's triggering to you, then that, in my opinion, shows where there's a place to heal still. And we have said on the shows that we've done together that deconstructing your faith is like peeling an onion. It makes you cry. There's lots of layers. There's so many things that go into it. So people kind of need a roadmap to go, okay, I just found out my whole life's a lie and everything that I believed, was just made up by these people. Now what? I can't trust myself. I can't think of anything because I shouldn't trust my brain and everything that goes along with it. So it's this, you're not only escaping an abusive relationship, you're also deconstructing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's what what a lot of the book is not, this is exactly what you should do, but this is what we noticed. This is what happened. This is how we heal. This is what I think you should look at. Like, one thing that I don't think many people like me pay attention to is, I was in the Southern Baptist Convention, and their big motto was start something new all the time. Be doing prayer walks so you can start a new church over across town. Keep starting something new. I would say to desert dwellers, don't start something new. Get better first. Spend some time getting to know yourself, repairing some relationships, maybe with your family or whatever. But do some self-care, take care of yourself, get better. Pastors are the worst at that. They just all of a sudden, like 2 weeks out of into deconstruction, I was wanting to go back to what's his face? Word of Life. Brian Zahn's church. And we were there for 2 years. And because I'm thinking, well, I got to get back in this and do it for the right team and, form the right church. And then even when I'm kind of on my own, then, well, I need to be a coach or something. I need to, I need to form a group and get some followers and so on. And certainly we've done some of that, but if I could do it over again, I'd go back and spend the first 2 years getting better. Going to counseling.
I mean, like I said, it's like a relationship. You do not want to jump back into another one right away. You want to heal, you want to digest. And that healing, like I said, is the most important part, because you really can't deconstruct, know yourself, leave your faith, all of the things that deconstruction involves if you don't trust yourself. And you can't trust yourself unless you have that spare time to go, okay, who am I? What am I doing? Where do I go? And what are my true morals and values and what I should hang on to? A lot of people go, I want none of it, throw the baby out with the bathwater, totally reject everything. And I think that's stunts growth too. So I think we should dissect it and be like, okay, I can live with this. For me, I only read the Bible through the lens of love. If it says anything that's not loving, if it says anything like kill your disrespectful kids, talking about horse genitalia, all of those things, that's not love. So if the Bible is ever going to be a source for me, I can only use it in the lens of love, which means I have to disregard most of it.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I can still learn and be like, okay, this is the way that I can be more loving without having all the bullshit on the other side. So learning that discernment when we have been so immersed in the religion is I think a good step too.
Yeah. So the things we're talking about, we're still in the first chapter. These are just paragraph titles that are kind of doing a summary before we go into deeper stuff. But for some reason I felt like I needed to put bypassing in the first. I saw that. So much. It's something I never realized till I got out of organized religion, but I realized it was so much of what we did, and it's a way the trains kept running.
Explain bypassing.
So bypassing is using spiritual language or phrases or practices or whatever to bypass the real issues. It's having neat phrases when people say things or when people ask questions, like God is in control. God will take care of it. Don't worry about it. God's going to do something miraculous. And it's bypassing the real issues.
It's also saying things like, well, at least. So, somebody has a miscarriage. Well, at least you can have children. Or, somebody, their marriage is crumbling. Well, at least you have a marriage, or, So saying at least is another form of bypassing that's just really toxic. And it really is a conversation. It's a conversation stopper.
Yeah.
So think about it that way.
You're going through, it's like, well, okay, so my life is shit, but at least I'm here.
Right.
It just doesn't work. It's the pat on the head of go away, darling.
But it is condescending, and it's a conversation stopper. How am I supposed to respond to you if you say, which I know you would never say this to me, Sherry, but if you said, well, at least you can have children. I mean, at least you got pregnant. Right. I mean, how am I supposed to respond to that? Basically, I feel like I am not supported. I'm not heard. I'm not seen. It does put that shame right on top of me. Right. Yeah. So, because now I'm like, oh, well, how selfish of me to even bring this topic up. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And if you do ask another question, that's what's coming next. I think you just really need to get back in your Bible and figure out how to trust God, or, it's going to become shameful for you pretty soon if you keep pushing it, saying, I'm not better. I don't feel better. That's not okay. That's not an adequate answer. I need a better answer. But people are going to bypass. And if you push too hard, then you're going to get shame and guilt. And sometimes you'll get shunned, even within your own church. So
it's really hard for people to sit in other people's discomfort. I mean, like my discomfort in something or my sadness might make somebody feel uncomfortable. So, and it's hard for them to sit in that with me. But that's exactly what we need to do. If, we're going to heal, we have to be able to sit with one another, not pass judgment, maybe not even say anything, but just go, man, that sucks. That really, really sucks. And I'm so sorry that you're going through that, and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I was going to say. You're good.
In saying that you just need to get into your Bible more, you're just not praying enough. It puts the blame back on us, right? It's not that this religious system that you have built is not satisfying my needs or measuring up to truth in any way, and you're disregarding all of my emotions because of it. That's what makes people leave more. I mean, it is, but church was originally, this is so hard because it's been screwed up for so long, but I think the initial intentions were a community of strength, or were a community of support. But even in Jesus's time in the Gospels, we hear that his friends bailed on him too. So it's a constant struggle that we do, but we should not be having religious indoctrination in our ear that makes things worse. We already feel bad about ourselves enough. Self-esteem is a growth for all of us humans. Adding the fact that we're pieces of shit because God says so makes it unbearable sometimes.
Yeah. So we, at the end, that first chapter, with all those kind of summary paragraphs and things, is just to say, is it worth it? And to just spend a little bit of time assuring people that this is going to be worth it. We've interviewed hundreds of people.
Oh, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. I mean, my life 25 years ago to now is so vastly different. I am finally happy for the first time in my life because I've been doing this for almost 27 years now, deconstructing everything. So, I've gotten over the pain but there's still some things, like there's a big thing on social media recently about how many people thought that they would die young. And I was hit with an awe with that. It was like, oh my God. My girlfriend Heidi teases me all the time. Weren't you supposed to die at 27? Weren't you supposed to die at 40? And because the rapture was surely going to come or something was going to happen. I mean, we were not Social Security. Who cares? Jesus is coming back. I'm marrying a guy I don't want to. Who cares? Jesus is coming back. So you have all of that stuff.
Yeah, and that's bypassing as well.
Yeah. To go. I mean, it was like, I was taught starting at 6 years old to focus only on my death. And so now, how do I not even do that? Not worry about the death after I was told for so many years that was the only thing that mattered.
Yeah.
Can I tell you that my sister and I just had this conversation?
Really?
Because she was actually in the car with her husband and her father-in-law, and her husband and her father-in-law did not really grow up in this, strict denominational, whatever you want to call it. So they didn't hear all the garbage basically from the evangelical, stuff. And she said she was so uncomfortable because they just talked about death, her father-in-law's death and dying in the next 10 to 15 years, as if it's just part of life. And she was like, I feel so triggered. And she goes, I really think it's because of religion and how religion, I mean, Sherry, I prayed that prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray
every fucking night. Yes.
The time I can't remember a time I didn't pray that. And I'm thinking, we say, if I die before I wake, you are planting in these little babies the idea like you better get it right, because if you die before you're awake and you don't have it right with God, you're not going to heaven, you're going to hell.
Yep.
Like, talk about abuse and trauma. 100%. That
My
prayer
6-year-old
is so
grandson told
traumatic.
me that a week and a half ago.
Who said
Literally,
he
if
did?
you don't be good, you're going to hell, Grandma.
Oh.
And I'm like, not the person you should be saying this to. And I mean, he was arguing with me, and I was like, it's a story, honey. And he's like, it's not a story. It's true. There's heaven and there's hell. And I'm like, no, do not put this on yourself. You are 6.
Yeah.
And my son and his mother, Jalen's mother, his fiance, they're not religious. So, they're not going to church. They're not doing this. And my 6-year-old already has this, thinking of this.
Wow.
And as he's arguing with me, he's like, I've seen movies. I've seen movies on heaven and hell, and I know what I'm talking about. And it was like, no, honey, it's a story. And I think that is, start them young. It says that in the Bible, they will return to their ways. All of that is to make sure that it sticks and we feel like shit about ourselves. And that way we have to reach out to this God to just feel good.
And yet, even reaching out to this God, it's like not good enough.
Yeah.
And so
unless you get your prayers answered.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you just suck.
Yeah. It is just such, like, it is just full of like trauma, just the whole thing. I mean, it's like guilt and shame, like you were saying at the beginning, guilt, shame, compounded on guilt and shame, just to make you feel like you are absolutely worthless. And I question, how is that what God wants? How is that the way Christ wanted things to be? I mean, I just don't think, I feel like in evangelical Christianity that we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, right? We're like, you're going to hell, but God loves you, but only if you do things right. But Jesus died for your sins, but
He's forgiving, like, but unless you don't ask for it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so many contradictions. And I think that's why, especially in this age of the internet and all of this information that is coming forth, that is how people are enabling themselves to pull up and go, oh my God, what have I been in? I saw a video today. Her, I can't think of her name right now. Purple hair, beautiful. She's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And she said today, convince me, you've been saying all of this stuff forever. Convince me. And we just can't get out of it because we still want that. It was what our parents taught us. We thought that was the way to go. And then we find out it's trauma. We find out that it was eating all of us up and not, I mean, up until probably 35, maybe 30, maybe even closer to 40, I was like this the entire time going, oh, I had a fantastic weekend. God's going to kill me this week. Mm-hmm. The more fun I had, the more heretic I acted. I was living in constant fear, constant fear. And people picked up on that. People saw that. I didn't know I was exuding that, but I can see over the course of my life that people did feel that energy. So when I was able to release it and go, okay, I'm not so afraid anymore, people now say, oh my God, I love your energy. So, I mean, that in itself is a transformation that I never even could have foreseen, expected, but that brings me so much joy because 20 years ago, no one would have said that.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So we moved in the second chapter into the 4 existential concerns, or some people call them that. And maybe I can help by just reading a little bit of this.
Okay.
So in the 70s, Ernest Becker won the Pulitzer Prize for denial of death. In the work, he postulated that human animals know nothing about dying by stating the knowledge of death is reflective and conceptual, and animals are spared from it. Other psychologists like James Anderson of Scotland now assert, I believe we are just now justified in thinking that chimpanzees have some kind of awareness of death. So the first existential concern is death. I should have told you that before I jumped down here in the middle of the chapter. So he says, I believe we are now justified in thinking that chimpanzees can have some kind of awareness of death. Until animals grow a more developed cortex or learn to speak, we may just have to assume they're more concerned with base concerns like food and inherent danger. But even though that we're not sure whether animals have this concern, we know that humans absolutely do. It's one of our biggest fears. The reason the fear of death is below the fear of public speaking is because most phobias and fears are connected to the fear of dying, so much that we subdivide it into multiple other categories. Most of us generally choose to focus on smaller concerns and treat them like they are life and death. This gives us the false assumption that we are controlling our environment and making our world safer.
Yeah.
In some ways, this makes sense and is a practical approach to life, but we still haven't addressed fear and the bigger issues that it entails. We join religious groups because they promise they have the antidote to death. Once we accept their creed and their promises, it becomes very uncomfortable to question the obvious flaws and inconsistencies in their suppositions. At least they keep us entertained and distracted so that we don't think about the existential questions too often. And so there's 4 existential concerns. And I did death because death is the most
okay,
common.
So I talk about this in my book where I say I did a super scientific Facebook poll a couple years ago. I wanted to see what people were afraid of dying, because that's what I assumed too. I assumed that everybody was afraid of dying. And most of the people came back and said, I'm only afraid of the pain of dying. I have no fear of any afterlife. Some believe because they would be in heaven. Others believe that it was because they would be worm food, just in the dirt doing nothing. And others believe that we would go on to another type of life. But I think that the fear of death is uniquely religious based. I mean, when Paul said, for the wages of sin are death, that changed death from a natural process of life to a punishment. And I don't think that atheists or people, I mean, most people don't want to die, but I think that the fear is uniquely religion based. It's like, okay, well, if I do, I do. There's not that fear of the afterlife and, oh my God, what if I don't get it right? Yeah. What if I end up in hell? Because that's gone if they don't believe it.
Yeah. And the other ones are fear of freedom, which is a weird one. It's kind of hard to decipher, but fear of isolation and fear of meaninglessness. So those 4 things. But the reason I put it into this book with all of our stuff that we've pulled and distilled from other places to put it before it is because when you start deconstructing, that's one of the things that happens is all of a sudden you're facing these big, huge existential questions that you've bypassed and you've avoided thinking about for so long. Now you're going to have to think about them. And so I didn't in any way try to provide the ideal answer. I just tried to think through it in this chapter for all of those things. Meaninglessness is one that people talk about a lot. I hear all kinds of different people talking about that. They talk about nihilism, the lack of meaning. And a lot of people they say they have to deconstruct to atheism, but it's really to nihilism. You've got to get there where, okay, nothing means anything. Now, what really means something?
Yeah.
So, but you have to face that. You have to analyze it. You maybe go on some treks and learn about other religions and things like that. And how do they look at death and how do they find meaning and so on. And,
I mean, even elephants mourn their death. So, it's, we will always miss the people who are no longer with us. We will always want them to still be here. But like I said, when death was associated with sin or goodness or not being, that's when all of the fear comes in. I mean, I got into a bit of a debate with someone on Facebook because I was like, I'm sorry, my dog is dying. I know he has never sinned. There is no way that sin causes death. A tree, a bush, animals, there's no way that this is even likely or logical in any way. Death is just simply part of our lives. And I had to go from, wow, all of this is crap, to for many years. And then I look back and go, I was far too carefree, I think is the way that I can put it. Because when I left and was like, okay, religion is shit, I don't believe in anything anymore. I no longer cared about my integrity. I no longer cared about my morals. And that's what I mean by throwing everything out with the bathwater, or with the baby in the bathwater, because those things never mattered to me anymore, because those were associated with religion. Now, all these years later, I think that those are the only things that matter. No beliefs, nothing. My integrity, my morals, my word, those are the only thing that matter to me at this point. And getting there, you're right, I had to completely throw it out and then start to rebuild.
So there's a movie called The Big Fish. It's one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I don't think so.
It's called The Big Fish. It's about a guy who was a salesman and traveled all the time. And he had these fantastic stories. One of them was of the big fish that got away. And he was dying, and his son went to spend some time with him. And he kept going through all these things, and he would tell the son the stories. Then the son finally went and met some of these actual people that he talked about, and they really weren't what he made them out to be. They were normal people and things like that. And the thing that he kept relying on, he said, I don't have to fear death because I know how I'm going to die. The witch told me how I'm going to die. And that was also kind of a character that was manipulated in his mind and so on. But it just kind of illustrates that same thing, that through religion, through our stories, we want to say, this is how I'm going to die. This is what's going to happen after I die, which you really don't know.
Yeah,
for sure. Any of those things, and kind of learning who we are, getting comfortable with our death, realizing that everybody dies. We don't know where we're going to go. And the worst thing we can do is make up a fish story to help us bypass, because what he had done by thinking that he knew how his life was going to turn out, he had, not spent time with his son. He hadn't been authentic with the people that mattered most to him. And I think that's what we miss.
Yeah, I mean, I think the morals, the integrity, and all of that, there are lessons there, but it tends to be more destructive, tribal, everything that we shouldn't do, it is, as far as religion goes. I mean, if some people say to me, I feel like church makes me a better person. And I say, well, that's awesome. Good for you. But why are you better than someone else? Is there those types of things involved? So I think we're always looking to feed our ego and feel like we are better than someone else. And religion totally gives you that. It says, if you believe this, you're the only right ones. You're going to heaven. They're going to hell. I mean, it's just constant division. And people are seeing that, and that's why they're leaving. They're like, I'm not supposed to love my cousin who's gay. I'm not supposed to, do this or that. The lies are mounting, and we're seeing it. And again, the trauma is what we're left over.
So I don't know where you want me to go now, but like the next chapters, I mean, those existential concerns, we know a couple of people that can help you process those in a good way, in a healthy way. But the next chapter is called listening. It's one of the most important things we've learned, especially me. And
it's hard for men.
I'm still trying. Yeah. And, but when we did the conference last fall, that was all women, and then I interviewed several women, including you, before that for the same series. That's what they said more than anything. If I could tell men anything, I'd tell them to listen, stop interrupting us, stop explaining things to us, and listen to what we have to say. So many of them said that without any prompting at all, that was most important. And we've found just by listening to stories that we learn so much, first of all, but second of all, when we would just listen to people, it helped them tremendously. And
well, it's honoring them, right?
Yeah, and you believe their story.
Yeah.
Let them tell their story, listen to it, and it helps them and it helps us. So I think it's really important. It's a really short chapter, but I decided we needed to include that. But then we also talked about a plan for us. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, right? And I think I've broached that subject in 3 books altogether, because in 20 years of ministry, we saw so many people that have been told God has a plan and God has a purpose for you. And I told people that. And if I ask my son, if I tell my son I have a purpose for you, his next question is what?
What is it?
What is it?
Yeah.
What is the plan? And
yes.
I said, so many people.
Can you imagine saying that to your kid? I have a plan for you, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
I can tell you. So you have so many people in church taking copious notes, listening to the sermon, hoping to hear their plan and their purpose. They go to conferences and they buy extra books, and they're searching for a plan and a purpose. And what happens is they eventually get frustrated. They don't blame that on God. They don't even blame it on the preacher. They blame it on themselves. Maybe I'm not doing enough. I need to study my Bible more, or pray more, and it's guilt and shame and all that, without even realizing what we can tell them out in the desert is maybe there's a plan that you have for your life. What about that? Let's investigate that some. And maybe if you go inside and just take a break from church for a while, maybe you'll find your plan. And the big thing, I think, and the things Laura and I talk about nowadays is intuition, developing our intuition. We need guides from time to time, and they'll show up when you need them. But and you'll need some of that. But mostly what you need is someone to listen to you and to go inside, find out who you are. Then you'll know what you need to do. It really gets kind of simple.
I posted today on Facebook that the only woman that was ever listened to or believed was Mary. the only one. Everybody else is lying, but she was telling the truth. I mean, 2,000 years. This is, women have been disregarded and silenced and all of that. And that's why, I just heard a statistic the other day that like 70% of believers are women, which is really interesting to me. I think it's because of the need for community, for love, and all of those things. But it's also who is leaving too. They are the ones that are leaving saying, you didn't give me what I wanted. To be listened to.
Yeah. So some of the following chapters are things we've pulled out of our book. And like I said, distilled and refined and making them. Hi, puppy. There's a puppy in the background.
My dog.
Yeah. So, the first one kind of evolved from Out in the Desert in the Being book, and this idea of being and becoming what you always were is I think really important, because I was a doer, and when preachers preach about don't just be hearers of the word, but be doers also, and then mention the sign-up sheet in the back lobby. You can sign up on the way out, and then we got something you can do, because you don't know your plan and purpose, and so you got absorbed into our plan and our purpose. So you probably just need to do more. I could do that. I bought into that, and I could do that. What were you going to say?
I have a friend who left specifically because of that. He said that I was so sick of being blamed for the lack of reality in their truth. I mean, he didn't get into religion until he was much older as an adult, but he still kept waiting for them to say, okay, this is what you need to do. When he would go to them and say, this is what I've done, they would say, you're just not doing it right. You're just not doing it enough. You're just not, you're just not. Yeah. Was always the start of their answers.
Yeah. So another thing is the other chapter is going inside, trusting ourselves, learning to do that, learning to have some inner work, and
like I'm the church's nightmare, right? I'm loud. I am opinionated. I'm a woman. I no longer believe. All of those things caused me to hate myself for so many years. But when I was able to truly deconstruct and say, these are other people's opinions, these aren't facts, that's when I was able to love myself. So when they're telling you that everything about you is shit, it also prevents you from loving yourself and being strong enough to leave. It prevents you from having all of those things and valuing yourself enough to do the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, we say be where you are and be who you are, but you have to know who you are first. It's authenticity, and being where you are is being present. Then you can be present and being yourself, being where you are is just as important as preaching a sermon or, whatever activity, reading your Bible, serving the poor, all those things. But it really happens when you go inside, you learn to trust yourself. All that stuff is connected.
I think Wayne Dyer said you are a human being, not a human doing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still feel guilty when I take time off or I rest because I was so ingrained with your actions justify your righteousness and all of that I still feel guilty. I mean, I have to talk myself down. You've done a good job today. You've worked your ass off. You've done everything that needs, and I'm fighting with myself going, no, I can do more. I can do more. Because just that, I think it's a slave mentality of, work until you break and then God will provide something at some point, hopefully.
Yeah. So we went on to pull in another thing, darkness and shadow. It's about doing shadow work and a specific way that we did that. It's called focusing, that we've done with other people. And some Benedictine sisters taught me how to do it.
Nice.
Plus I have friends that it's just a somatic therapy that helps you, again, have a mind-body connection so that you talk about what do you feel and where do you feel it. Then dealing with that parts. Dr. Amy, what's her last name?
Apigia.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Okay. Apigia. Dr. Amy. And she does the biology of trauma. She calls it parts work.
Okay.
Because if you say I'm angry, that's too overwhelming. It's too much. You can't. It's not your whole self that's driving the bus. It's that one part of you that's trying to resolve itself. It's a past trauma, and so she calls it parts work. But in it, when we do it, we say a part of me feels, and this is where I feel it. And then we're present with that. Sometimes we have to speak to that inner child or different.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm hearing you right.
Yeah.
You were saying to compartmentalize the anger or pain?
Compartmentalize.
So I love it. I'm just making sure that I understand, because that really brings everything down, because when you go, oh my God, everything's so horrible, you can't focus on anything.
Exactly.
You have to compartmentalize it.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, when I would be in those bouts of shame or anger or whatever, it was incredibly overwhelming. I mean, it was almost debilitating.
Totally.
I didn't know where to go, what to do, what my next steps were. But if I can tell myself a part of me feels anxious, about going to work tomorrow or whatever, then I can have compassion for that part of me.
Totally. That's great.
Yeah.
But if you say, I'm angry, that's overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming.
And that's shaming also. And Laura used to, I don't know if you mind me telling it, but describe it as a shame spiral.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's, oh man, I don't even know if I want to talk about it, but when that stuff gets triggered, when it comes up and that shadow emerges because it hasn't been dealt with, it's frightening, but if you can, when you realize it's a part of you, it's like a child that hasn't resolved this from the past and is just trying to get an answer so they can, and you say something as simple as sometimes you don't say anything, but you might just say, I got your back. In the Being book, I talked about that in depth, about what happened to me in a hermitage. And I just had to say to a 5-year-old version of myself, I got your back. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great way of looking at it, because it not only makes it manageable, it takes everything from the black or white perspective, right? When we look at the enormity of the situation, it can be overwhelming to everyone.
Yeah.
But to say, like my ex used to go, oh, well, I did that, so I'm horrible. You're like, no, let's just work on this, those types of things. And if we apply that same logic to ourselves, we can do that. Then all of a sudden it's, okay, I just need to work on this, not the whole world is going to shit, not hell, not all of these things that have been put on me, just this little part. And it makes it so manageable.
Yes.
And I think sitting with yourself in that, part of me that feels anxious, having compassion, not having judgment for it. And then, like, when we talk about, finding people that are our people that can companion with us, those are the types of people that we need to find. We need to find people that we can share those parts of ourselves, and they're not going to sit in judgment of us. They're going to be like, yeah, that sounds hard. It kind of goes back to that empathy piece that I was talking about earlier, and it's so funny. And I'm sure, like, I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sure, Sherry, you've done this too, but it's like, it is amazing how much empathy I can have for other people. Right. But I had to really, really learn to have that for those parts of me.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for you to be anxious, Sherry. I'm not going to judge you for that. Yeah. But man, I would be incredibly hard on myself.
Yeah.
And I would just, and like Carl said, that spiral just starts. I'm anxious. Why am I anxious? This is so stupid that I'm anxious. And so now I'm not just anxious, but I've heaped on shame.
Yeah.
I put shame on top of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is so hard to get out of that. And you need to have those people. One of mine is one of my sisters, where I can just go, I'm spiraling right now. I am in a shit storm. I'm in a spiral, and I just need somebody to hear me right now. And those are the people that you need to find. And while being out in the desert does feel incredibly lonely, I mean, especially at the beginning, you find, like you said, we found other people who have come alongside us and just will sit with us in the thick of it. And that's what's, I feel like, once you start tapping into like resources like what you have, Sherry, and what we have here at the Desert Sanctuary, I think you realize that there are more people out there that really get what you're going through and can have that empathy for you.
You said earlier that some people just don't want to see your pain, that they get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. But I think that's an indication of they're not your people.
100%.
That you and I shared after my show last year at the Deuce was something I will treasure forever.
Oh, same. I just thought about that today.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I feel honored to have been able to be there for you at that moment and to hug you. Mm. There is no judgment. There was concern, but I was honored to be there for you in that pain.
Yeah.
So if someone says, whoa, I can't handle it, move on. They're not your people.
Yeah.
The sisters used to say, okay, Carl, because here's what I would do. So for 2 weeks in a row, I would come in and tell them how well I did at something. I accomplished this. And they go, okay, but what about this other thing? And I said, well, yeah, I'm whatever. And they'd say, well, where do you feel that? I'm angry. I'm anxious. Where do you feel it? And they'd ask me to put my hand on it. It was usually on my heart. And I'd say, oh, that's it. And maybe that's not the first time you felt that. And I said, no, we'll just be with that. And then I would begin to tell them about it. And they would just go, and they just kind of look at me and shake their head a little bit, nod their head a little bit. They'd say, tell me more about that.
So they weren't going to let you bypass your own
they didn't.
stuff, because it's easy to do that by saying, but look at all these amazing things I'm doing. I want to kind of just, push this really scary, vulnerable part of me down. And
it's not just religious based, right? I mean, I think our entire society doesn't like pain and tries to numb it. That's why we have the massive drug issues that we have. People are just trying to get through their day. People are just trying to get through the point. Just my grandson's calling me. Sorry.
You're fine.
But they, there's a need, a compulsion just to be able to get through the day and be like, if I have to numb myself enough to do so, then I will, instead of dealing with the pain, because it's hard. It's really, really hard to do the work, but that's also what makes it so worth it, to come over to the other side.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go away.
No.
It comes back and it comes out sideways, and it's like a beach ball we're trying to hold underwater. It eventually emerges and we blow up for no reason. And we can't understand what we're even mad about. We don't know why we got in that argument. We don't know why we're still in the argument, but until, we deal with that part of us that's trying to get our attention, it's going to come back. It's going to be there. It's not going anywhere.
We can only put a Band-Aid on it for so long. That if it doesn't heal, that sore is going to fester. It's going to bleed on other people. It's going to come across everything. Drugs, abusive relationships. I mean, it really does. All of us are supposed to heal. And whether that is religious trauma, familial trauma, abuse, any of that, we all have to go through that process, or we will end up a drug addict or an alcoholic or someone that just lived their life trying to get through the pain instead of getting to the pain.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Of course.
We are not licensed professionals in this ebook or whatever it is. I've said that several times in there, but we will listen to people. We'll hear people's stories. We'll try to help them with focusing and some things like that. But eventually we'll keep pushing you probably to find someone that's trauma informed and a good therapist, because we all need those kinds of things. I actually have several friends that are counselors, and some of them I can counsel with, some of them I can't, but
well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so very much. This conversation has been fabulous. And yes, the first step in healing is acknowledging where the injury is. So we need to be able to dig down into ourselves and say, okay, this is where that pain is and where is it from, and go from there.
And it's scary, but it's worth it.
Oh, it is scary, but you know what? Working through your strengths working through your fears builds strengths.
Yep, you're right.
Okay. Any final words, and where can people find you?
Go ahead.
I don't really have any final words. This is just,
that website's not good anymore.
Oh, carlforehand.com.
I destroyed that website. That's up.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take that off.
I lost the whole thing.
But I guess you can find us on Facebook. You know, if you just look up our names, we're on Facebook. And
this is the Desert Sanctuary.
The Desert Sanctuary.
Called the
yeah.
Desert Sanctuary.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah. So, but this has been a great conversation. It's been so good to see you because I feel like I haven't seen you in so long.
Forever, right?
Yeah, I know.
I love you guys so much.
We love you too.
So much. I'm going to send you backstage and close the show.
All right. Thanks, Sherry.
Actually, my grandson wants to say hi first. Let's see. He loves being on the show.
Look at that. Oh, he's so cute. He's so cute.
Oh, he is such a joy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, I'm going to send you back.
Okay.
What a great show. I really hope that you guys were able to get some tips and tricks on trying to start the healing or further your healing, and just get going, because it's all for you. Your healing will make you love yourself more and be able to love others more. I love talking to the four hands and learning new things, and especially how to become a more loving person. If you like the show, subscribe, share it, all that good stuff. Next week, we are talking to Dr. Jennifer Bird on her book, Marriage in the Bible. And right now we are headed back to the VIP lounge to continue the conversation. You could be there for as little as $3 a month. See you there next time, and I will talk to you soon. As always, walk in love. Mwah! See you next week.